It has happened. After 11 years of waiting, since the last book, The Season of Storms, was published back in 2013, a new book about Geralt of Rivia, written by the author of the original saga, Andrzej Sapkowski, has been released, and it is incredible. We've been eagerly anticipating this book, absorbing every bit of information we could find, and we have no regrets. From a fan's perspective, it turned out to be genuinely great. It answers many questions about the history of the Witcher's world, dispels some myths, and even introduces the new Witcher school from the video games into the canon. Just imagine that. And besides, we have a brand new story about the youth of the Witcher Geralt of Rivia. We can't wait to tell you all about it, so sit back, relax, because this is the old Witcher speaking. Before we begin, we would like to thank our patrons for their help. Without you guys, this content would not be possible, as this channel would literally cease to exist. For the rest of you guys, please consider joining these amazing people, follow the link, and become part of our community. In the meantime, get yourself a warm drink, for it is cold outside, and we'll tell you about the book Rozdroże Kruków. Time frames, new key dates, Geralts True Age. Let us start with a short disclaimer. We've just read the book, so we're sharing only our initial impressions and some details that caught our eye the most. We will not retell the book in detail. Firstly, we don't want to spoil it completely, and second, it would be better if you write in the comments whether you would be interested in such a video. So first of all, let us talk about the time frame in which the events of Rozdroże Kruków take place, and about other important dates that are clarified or simply mentioned for the first time in this book. The story unfolds during the youth of the Witcher Geralt of Rivia, when a young mutant who has just survived the terrible trials in Kaer Morhen sets out for the first time on a journey through the northern kingdoms to fulfill his destiny. That is, to do what he was trained for all these years, to cleanse the world of monsters. The first thing you might be interested in, given that the book focuses on Geralt's younger years, is the time period in which the story takes place. Sapkowski states that it is the year 1229, and this really upends all the fan theories and assumptions built on data from the books and the games. Because at that time, Geralt was about 18-20 years old. This means that at the time of his death, which according to the books occurred in 1268, Geralt was only about 57 to 59 years old. That is, not 100 years old or even older, as many fans assumed. There were even highly popular YouTube videos speculating about this. Geralt wasn't even 60 at the time of his death, and during the events of the game saga he was only about 60 to 65. Yes, that is still a fair age, but it no longer makes the Witcher some mythical, semi-immortal creature as we used to think. Witcher mutations still keep reflexes in good shape at around 60, which is not unbelievable. You can easily accept it. In general, Sapkowski gave us quite a few dates throughout the book. For that, we are very grateful to him. Let us look, for example, at the destruction of Kaer Morhen, when a crowd of crazed peasants, ideologically fueled by a manifesto called Monstrum, or Portrayal of Witchers, stormed Kaer Morhen. They killed everyone there and destroyed the core of the Witcher schools. You probably imagined it before as a huge massacre where all the sorcerers who worked on mutations were killed, and the peasants somehow slaughtered dozens of Witchers in Kaer Morhen. It sounded strange at the time. If Kaer Morhen was filled with Witchers and sorcerers, wouldn't they have repelled that uprising? Previously, this was just ignored. Now Sapkowski has set everything straight and recounted the events of the Kaer Morhen massacre in detail, a massacre that was in fact more of a slaughter of those madmen who stormed the Witcher stronghold. It turns out the fans were wrong again. Previously, it was widely believed that the attack on Kaer Morhen took place in the 1180s. However, it turns out it happened later. 1194 to be precise. And yes, Geralt wasn't even born then. How did Geralt become a Witcher after the massacre then? It is actually simple. It turns out that the attack on Kaer Morhen was not what fans had previously imagined. At the time of the attack, there were only 8 Witchers in Kaer Morhen. The rest were out on contracts in completely different parts of the continent. Now it is clear why, despite their supernatural skills, they couldn't fend off those crazy quote-unquote hillbillies. They were simply overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Before dying, they managed to kill most of those madmen. 7 Witchers were killed, and one, whom we will talk about later, escaped. The names of these 7 are now engraved on the walls of Kaer Morhen forever. So Kaer Morhen was not really destroyed, it was only partially damaged. The rest of the Witchers of the School of the Wolf continued to live there after they returned. The sorceress also did not live there permanently but visited from time to time to perform mutations. Thus, after the famous massacre, Kaer Morhen continued to function and continued to produce witchers and serve as a home for monster slayers. That is all. Nothing overly dramatic happened. A couple of decades later, these walls let the white-haired witcher Geralt of Rivia out into the world, one of the last witchers of the continent. Why the last? Because the reason for the cessation of witcher creation was, believe it or not, moral dilemmas, not the massacre. The sorcerers noticed that they were making no progress. The mutations remained the same. If they altered the formula, the risks increased. After all the mutations, only 2 to 3 boys out of 10 survived, often fewer. Therefore, it lost any scientific sense and became simple child murder. At some point, the sorcerers got fed up and stopped it because they were willing to kill for science, not just for the sake of killing. They did not see themselves as murderers, presumably. Therefore, the last generations of witchers were trained exclusively by the elderly witches themselves, like Vesemir. The sorcerers took all the formulas, reagents, and devices with them. That is how everything ended. Of course, at the same time, there was also the School of the Cat, about which we learned much more, and where experiments did not stop but only intensified, at least for a while, producing absolutely cruel and bloodthirsty witchers. But again, we'll discuss that later. For now, let us remember that based on all this, we can assume that Yennefer is indeed much older than Geralt, for example, and we can draw many other conclusions from these new dates. And yes, this is now the new canon. It will most likely be followed and is worth relying upon. We see that the dark spots in the Witcher world's history are gradually beginning to fill in, and it's incredible. We never thought we'd live to see the day. Whew. We've shared what struck us the most. Now let us move on to the book itself, its plot and storyline. We'll tell you about them as much as possible without major spoilers. However, if you want to completely avoid any potential spoilers, feel free to skip this part of the video. The beginning of the book and the plot setup. As we said, our story is about the first steps of a young witcher Geralt of Rivia in the harsh world of the Northern Kingdoms. And of course, the first victim of the future White Wolf will not be a ghoul, nor a vampire, but the most terrifying monster of all, a human. As soon as he sets out, Geralt naturally gets into trouble. On the road, he witnesses a random merchant being attacked by bandits. These bandits were not just common thugs, they were protected by a local village leader. But Geralt, of course, did not know this and, full of good intentions, stood up for the victim. For the first time out of practice, he used all his Kaer Morhen honed skills. He killed the bandits. And of course, this landed him in huge trouble. The local village leader ordered Geralt's capture and intended to hang him. Thus, the story of the White Wolf could have ended before it began. But another witcher named Preston Holt came to Geralt's rescue. And yes, spoiler alert, this is the same 8th witcher who escaped after the attack of Kaer Morhen, unlike his brothers who died in battle. He seeks revenge, and he seeks payback. By saving Geralt, he partially furthers his own goals, and then offers Geralt to become his successor. Preston is an elderly witcher. He is limping, and he cannot fulfill contracts properly anymore. Geralt decides to accept Preston's offer, and that's the main setup of the entire book. We won't go further into the story, so let us just briefly discuss some interesting details we noticed. First of all, we see that Geralt had more than one mentor. Besides Vesemir, there were several people who guided him on his path and taught him how the world works. Secondly, the book describes that they settle at Preston's home, a manor called Rockamora, which translates to revenge. Much of the book revolves around this revenge theme. The book also tells the story of the witch's origin, which somehow contradicts the canon from the game universe introduced by CD Projekt Red. It also shows Geralt's formation as a character who in the future would not want to get involved in any sort of disputes, not considering it his business to set things right. Although of course we know he's not very good at staying out of trouble. Anyway, we've reached the heart of what the book has to offer, so let us share some of our impressions. Review of the book. First impressions. We'd like to say that we liked the book. The new Witcher book by Sapkowski is easy to read. It's not overloaded with political intrigues and events, focusing more on Geralt and his character development. However, we would not recommend to expect any incredible breakthrough from this book. It is a normal, not too long of a story about Geralt's early years in Rivia, with a few historical clarifications and additions to the lore, nothing more. Consider it more as fan service. The main Witcher saga ended long ago, and it is impossible to replicate the feelings we had reading it. And we all understand that if not for the incredible success of the Witcher game trilogy and all the hype from the Netflix series, Sapkowski would hardly have written this new book. For years he insisted Geralt's story was finished and he would not continue it. But as they say, money talks. And for Sapkowski, getting some from CD Projekt Red is as normal as releasing a new book simply because fans are waiting for it and will buy it at the first opportunity. Not because he suddenly found new inspiration or is ready to show the world new horizons of his talent and the story of Geralt of Rivia. So let us put it this way. The book is something like a light novel for an afternoon. It is not a suspenseful story. It is easily quote-unquote digested, and it hardly resembles the original Witcher saga, lacking that moral, political, and narrative depth. We've checked out some opinions from polished reviewers and bloggers, and they share roughly the same opinion. Many even criticize the book for not being the same quote-unquote Witcher everyone is used to. What Sapkowski borrowed from the games. Interesting details. Now let us delve deeper into the previously mentioned fan service. As in his new work, Pan Sapkowski made several crucial references to the game universe. It is clear he was ready to adopt certain elements, at least some of them. The first and the most important one is, of course, the School of the Viper. Yes, Rozdroże Kruków confirmed that multiple Witcher schools exist simultaneously, including the School of the Viper. Preston Holt represents that very school. Since it previously appeared exclusively in the game trilogy, we understand that Pan Sapkowski took this idea from there. Of course, the Polish author did not provide much more information, just confirmed the existence of such a school. But this alone is huge for the lore and will be a reason for fan discussions for a long time. We've also received confident confirmation that Witchers carry two swords on their backs. Previously, Sapkowski emphasized that Geralt carries one steel sword and the silver one is kept in his horse's saddlebags. But in this book, both Geralt and his, so to say, mentor Preston Holt carry both swords behind their backs. This, of course, is completely illogical. Why two swords at the same time? Especially since battles with monsters are rare and a Witcher usually prepares for them separately. But again, this matches the fan service, because Geralt of Rivia has become ingrained in the minds of fans as a Witcher who carries two swords, a silver one and a steel one behind his back. Statues and statuettes, posters, and artwork abound, and Sapkowski obviously wanted the fanbase to recognize the Witcher they know in his new book. Another cool detail given is why Geralt names all his horses Roach. In Polish, plotka means roach, a small fish. The book shows a scene where Geralt chooses his first horse. The seller offers him beautiful noble stallions, but Geralt pays attention to a nondescript dull mare and wants to buy her. The seller jokes that Geralt is like a fisherman ignoring fine pike and stubbornly trying to catch a weak roach. Geralt kind of enjoyed this wordplay. He buys that mare and names her Roach, and from then on he calls all his horses by that same name, Roach. We are also told more about the history of the Witcher Order and the origin of Witchers. It turns out that the first Witchers descended from ordinary sorceresses, village witches gifted with magic but also madness, who possessed paranormal powers. Later, renegade sorcerers used these gifted but crazy individuals as a basis. They examined their bodies, isolated the mutagens that made the first Witcher special, and began experimenting, creating Witchers by injecting these mutagens into ordinary children and testing them. That is the story. Sapkowski's stubbornness and integrity. Finally, let us talk about Pan Sapkowski's stubbornness and integrity. Let us talk about his desire, as some might say, to annoy the creators of CD Projekt Red once again by telling the world that their games are not canon. Why would he do this? Maybe just because he's a grumpy old man. This is just an assumption by the author of this video, not necessarily reality, just keep it in mind. First, a quick recap of the lore balance before the publication of this book. Check it out. Pan Sapkowski wrote his Witcher saga. CD Projekt Red carefully adapted it into a game universe, filling the games with references to the books. Also, Pan Sapkowski left many gaps and unspoken details in the original story, giving the readers only a brief and general idea of the continent's history. CD Projekt Red took this and expanded the world's history almost without contradicting the original source. They explained the creation of Witchers, added many new schools, developed character stories, and so on and so forth. In Rozdroże Kruków, Sapkowski seems to deliberately contradict some of the game's stories and the game lore, which he is obviously aware of, given the fact that he quote-unquote borrowed the School of the Viper. For example, he explains why Geralt wears a headband. It turns out he has a terrible scar under it, which he hides so as not to scare people. This detail makes Geralt's fictional images irrelevant to the quote-unquote pure canon. It is as if Sapkowski is laughing at the game developers who tried to design the character so that fans of the book series worldwide would believe in his originality. Sapkowski also recounts the origins of witchcraft. According to the game's canon, witchcraft originated at Castle Mulgrave, where Cosimo Malaspina and Ulzur formed the first united order of witchers. Then there was a split into different schools and so on. But for Sapkowski, the process began far to the north in a fortress called Mirabel. From there, a split began due to disputes among Ulzur's disciples about how to create witchers. Those who favored harsher methods split off and settled in the fortress of Bian Grud, found in the School of the Cat, one that produced utterly wild and insane witchers due to their cruel and vicious mutations. So now this is official canon, likely to be followed. We'd like to emphasize once again that we see that the dark spots in the Witcher world's history are filling in, and it is incredible. Good. We've told you what struck us the most. Now, let us wrap this up. In conclusion, Rozdroże Kruków is a fascinating addition that clarifies many historical details of the Witcher world and adds new canon that fans can discuss for years to come. Although the story may not live up to the profound depth of the original saga, and it sometimes feels like fan service, it still offers insights and resolves certain mysteries that have lingered for decades. As always, we will try to make more videos on this topic. If you enjoyed this one, please like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments if you'd like a detailed retelling of the plot once official translations are available, or if you plan to read the book yourself. Thank you guys for watching, and see you soon when the old Witcher speaks once more.